After the accident, my husband thought I was dead and took everything. But he didn't know I was still alive, and I was coming back for it all. Stay with me while I tell you how it all happened. And if this story moves you, show some love by sharing it, leaving a like, and letting others hear it too. Before everything fell apart, my life looked like something out of a picture-perfect postcard. My name is Emily Lawson, and I was married to Daniel, a man everyone described as charming, hardworking, and devoted. He ran a small but successful contracting business, and people in our Oregon town respected him. On the outside, we were that couple, the ones with a warm smile for neighbors and a neat little home with flowers in the front yard. I had my own graphic design business, mostly working from home. It wasn't a huge operation, but it brought in a steady income, and I loved it. Daniel always insisted on managing our finances, saying it was less stress for me. I didn't question it. I thought it was his way of taking care of us. I trusted him completely. We had our routines. Saturday mornings were for farmers markets. Sunday nights, we'd sit on the couch, sharing a blanket, and watch our favorite shows. If you asked me then, I would have told you I'd hit the jackpot in love. My friends used to tease me, saying, "Emily, you're living the dream." What I didn't know was that Daniel's version of love had limits and conditions. I couldn't see the cracks, but they were there, hiding under all the sweet gestures and polite smile. Looking back now, I realize he was always the one with control, over the money, the plans, the decisions. And I let him have it. It's strange, thinking about those days now, how safe I felt, how sure I was about him. I never thought I'd have to question his loyalty or his heart. If someone had told me that within a few months, everything would be gone, my home, my marriage, my trust, I would have laughed. But life has a way of showing you truths you never wanted to see. And sometimes it does it all at once. That truth began to unravel on a rainy night in late October. At the time, I didn't know it would be the night that split my life into before and after. Back then, it was just another drive home from meeting a client. My windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the downpour, the roads slick and glistening under the streetlight. I had no idea what was coming, because before I ever woke up in that hospital bed, before I even had a chance to understand what had happened, Daniel had already decided my life was over, and that everything we had built together was his to take. The rain that night felt endless, the kind that blurred everything into streaks of light and shadow. I was driving back from a late client meeting, the heater humming softly, the smell of wet asphalt seeping into the car. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. The roads were slick, and the wind howled like it had something to prove. I remember thinking how nice it would be to get home, take a hot shower, and curl up under a blanket. That's when it happened, a sudden flash of movement in my headlight. A deer. It darted into the road so fast I didn't even have time to think. Instinct took over. I swerved hard to the right, my tires screeching against the wet pavement. For a moment, I thought I'd avoided it. Then the car spun. Everything was a blur, metal groaning, my seatbelt cutting into my shoulder, the sharp thud as the car left the road and slid down an embankment. I remember the sickening drop, the weightlessness, then the violent stop that knocked the breath from my lungs. The last thing I saw was the shattered glass glittering like ice across the dashboard before everything went black. When I came to, it was only for seconds at a time. Bright lights. Voices. Pain so deep it felt like it lived in my bones. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then darkness again. Later, I learned I had been found hours after the crash by a truck driver who spotted the faint glint of my car's bumper through the trees. They said I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. The hospital became my world, though I barely understood where I was most of the time. Machines beeped steadily. Nurses whispered over me. Sometimes I thought I heard rain again, though it was just the oxygen hissing beside my bed. Days blurred into nights. I slipped in and out, caught between dreams and reality, my body too broken to wake fully. Somewhere in that fog, a mistake was made. A clerical error, they would later call it. My chart was switched with another patient who had died from similar injury. Daniel was told his wife had passed away. They said he looked shocked, devastated. But he didn't ask to see me. He didn't wait for more information. He signed the papers, took the death certificate, and walked away. No one questioned it. No one thought to double-check. To the hospital, I was just another critical patient with a long recovery ahead. To Daniel, I was already gone. I didn't know any of this then. All I knew was the endless drift between light and shadow, the voices I couldn't quite hold on to, and the cold that seemed to sink into my skin. It would be weeks before I truly woke up, and by then, the life I knew had already been taken from me. The first thing I remember clearly was the smell of disinfectant. It was sharp, almost stinging my nose, and it told me I wasn't in my own bed. I blinked up at a ceiling that wasn't familiar, my eyes struggling to adjust to the sunlight spilling through the blind. My body felt heavy, my limbs stiff, like I'd been asleep for years. When I tried to move, A dull ache rolled through me from head to toe. My throat was dry, my voice barely more than a whisper when I managed to ask, "Where am I?" A nurse appeared at my side, smiling warmly. "You're in the rehabilitation center, Emily. You've been here for a while, but you're getting stronger every day." I didn't remember getting here. The last solid memory I had was the rain, the deer, and then nothing. My head felt foggy, but questions started bubbling up fast. Where was Daniel? Why wasn't he here holding my hand? Why hadn't I woken up to his voice? That question was answered 2 days later, though not in the way I expected. I was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, looking out at a small garden, when I heard a voice behind me. "Emily?" I turned and saw my cousin Laura, her face pale but her eyes bright with tears. She rushed over and hugged me so tightly I winced. Laura had been overseas for months on a work assignment. I thought she must have flown back the moment she heard about the accident. But when she pulled back, there was something in her expression that made my stomach twist. "Emily, there's something you need to know," she said, her voice soft but trembling. The words that followed felt like a knife. Daniel hadn't been by my side at all. Not once. From the day of the accident, he'd acted as though I was gone. He didn't pay for my medical bills, didn't ask about my condition. Instead, he had emptied our joint accounts within a week, sold our house, and disappeared. I stared at her, trying to make sense of it. That doesn't make sense. Why would he? Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. "Emily, he told everyone you died. The hospital made some kind of clerical error and issued a death certificate. And he used it." The words hit harder than the crash ever could. My mind flashed to the life we'd built together, the home, the shared dreams, the trust. All of it gone, not because fate had taken it, but because Daniel had chosen to take it himself. I felt the burn of tears, but I didn't let them fall. My body might have been weak, but my mind was suddenly sharper than it had been in months. If Daniel thought I was dead, then he also thought I couldn't fight back. He was wrong. Very, very wrong. The anger came first, hot, sharp, and impossible to ignore. But anger alone wouldn't fix what Daniel had done. If I wanted justice, I needed facts. Proof. Something no one could deny. Laura was the one who got the ball rolling. She had always been resourceful, the kind of person who could find anything with enough time and a laptop. She set up her computer on the small table in my rehab room and started pulling up records. It didn't take long to find the first trace of him. A property purchase in a city 2 hours away, made just a month after my accident. Paid in full. My chest tightened as I looked at the numbers. That was our money. My money from years of late nights designing, meeting deadlines, building something of my own. But the shock didn't end there. Through social media profiles and public records, we learned he wasn't living alone. There was a woman, Megan Carter, at least 10 years younger than me. Her smiling face was all over his feed, her hand in his, their new home, in the background like some fairy tale. I felt sick. The betrayal burned deeper with every click. He had been playing house with someone else while I lay in a hospital bed, learning to walk again. It wasn't just about the money. It was the complete erasure of me, like I'd never existed. Laura placed a hand on my arm. "We'll get him, Emily. But we need everything. Dates, transactions, witnesses. We can't just accuse him. We have to prove it." So we got to work. Laura combed through bank statements I still had access to online, piecing together the withdrawals and transfers that drained our accounts. We printed property records showing his outright purchase. She even tracked down the dealership receipt for a shiny black truck he'd bought 2 weeks after burying me. Every new detail was like another blow, but it also fueled me. I imagined him, confident and smug, thinking he'd pulled it off without a trace. That thought alone kept me pushing past the exhaustion from my therapy sessions. At night, I'd lie awake in my rehab bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our life together in my mind. All the little lies I'd brushed off. The way he always insisted on handling the money, so I wouldn't have to worry. Now I saw those moments for what they were. Practice runs for the day he'd take it all. By the end of the second week, we had a thick folder full of evidence. But I knew that confronting Daniel directly wouldn't be enough. He would deny it, twist it, try to make me look unstable after everything I'd been through. No, this had to be done carefully, legally, permanently. And for that, I would need someone who knew exactly how to corner a man like Daniel and leave him no way out. Laura was the one who found him, Jack Whitmore, a local attorney with a reputation for being relentless in court, but surprisingly kind with his clients. She said he was exactly the kind of man who could take Daniel apart piece by piece. And at that point, I didn't need much convincing. When Jack walked into my rehab room, he carried a slim leather briefcase and the kind of calm confidence that made you feel like you'd already won. He shook my hand gently, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the accident, the mistake at the hospital, Daniel's sudden disappearance, and everything Laura and I had uncovered. Jack didn't interrupt except to ask a few sharp, precise questions. When I finished, he sat back in his chair, his jaw tight. "Emily," he said, "this isn't just betrayal. This is fraud, theft, and forgery. If what you're telling me is true, Daniel's in serious legal trouble." The word forgery stuck in my mind. Jack explained that in order to access certain joint accounts and sell the house so quickly, Daniel would have needed official proof of my death. That meant he had either used the hospital's clerical error or created documents himself to make it look legitimate. Either way, it was a crime. That day, we began building the case. Jack started by requesting full financial records from the banks and credit unions Every statement, every transfer, every withdrawal was scrutinized. He pulled property deeds showing the sale of our old home and the purchase of Daniel's new one. We compiled receipts, emails, and even screenshots from Megan's public posts flaunting their new life. But Jack didn't stop at paper trails. He wanted witnesses. He interviewed the realtor who sold our home, the notary who had signed off on certain documents, and even a neighbor who remembered Daniel moving out just days after the accident. Every person confirmed what I already knew. Daniel hadn't acted like a grieving husband. He'd acted like a man cashing in. One afternoon, Jack came back from the courthouse with a copy of the death certificate Daniel had filed. My stomach turned as I stared at it. My name, my birth date, my death date, typed neatly on official paper. The signature at the bottom wasn't from any doctor I'd met. It was a name I didn't recognize, later confirmed to be completely fake. "This," Jack said, tapping the paper, "is the nail in his coffin." For the first time since waking up, I felt something close to hope. We weren't just chasing shadows anymore. We had proof, hard, undeniable proof, that Daniel had crossed every legal line he could. And soon, he was going to find out that the woman he thought was gone forever was very much alive and ready to face him head-on. Jack said the element of surprise would be our greatest weapon, and I agreed. Daniel needed to see me, not just hear my voice, not just get a letter, see me alive, breathing, and unbroken. So we set it up. Jack told him there were some final legal documents to sign regarding the sale of our house, papers that required his presence in person. The meeting was scheduled in a neutral conference room at Jack's law office. I arrived early with Laura, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in my ears. Jack sat beside me, calm as ever, his folder of evidence resting on the table like a loaded weapon. When the door opened, the air seemed to change. Daniel walked in, wearing the same smug, easy confidence I remembered, until his eyes landed on me. His steps faltered, his face drained of all color, and for a moment, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. I just sat there, hands folded, watching him. "Hello, Daniel," I said evenly. My voice was steady, but inside, I felt a rush of satisfaction. He stammered something, my name, maybe, or a question, but Jack didn't give him time to find his footing. "Mr. Lawson," Jack began, his tone sharp but professional, "we've gathered here today to discuss several matters regarding your recent financial activity. As you can see, Emily is very much alive, contrary to the death certificate you submitted to multiple institutions." Daniel's eyes flicked between us, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for the right lie. I thought. Jack slid a sheet of paper across the table. "This is the forged death certificate you filed. And here," he added, flipping through the folder, "are the bank records showing the transfers from your joint accounts into your personal account, the sale of the marital home, and the purchase of your new residence in Portland, all within weeks of the accident." Daniel's hand twitched, but he didn't reach for the papers. I kept my gaze fixed on him, drinking in every flicker of panic that crossed his face. "I didn't," he started, but Jack cut him off smoothly. "We also have witness statements, property records, and evidence of your involvement with Megan Carter during the period you claim to be grieving. Now, Daniel, we can take all of this to court, where the consequences will be significant. Or you can start cooperating now." The silence stretched. Daniel's jaw worked, but no sound came out. He wasn't the confident man who used to tower over me, telling me how things would be. He was cornered, and he knew it. I leaned forward slightly. "You took everything from me, Daniel, but you made one mistake. You didn't finish the job. And now, I'm here to take it all back." For the first time since the accident, I saw fear in his eyes. And it was beautiful. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and paper, a place where truth and lies fought in the open. I sat beside Jack at the plaintiff's table, my palms pressed against my skirt to keep them from trembling. Across the room, Daniel adjusted his tie, pretending to look calm, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. Megan wasn't there. I guess she didn't want her name dragged into the mess. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The trial began with Daniel's attorney trying to spin a story about a devastated husband who had been misled by hospital paperwork and acted out of confusion, not malice. He claimed Daniel thought he was simply taking care of joint property after my passing. It was almost laughable, except nothing about this was funny. Jack stood, his voice steady but commanding, and began dismantling the lie. He presented my medical records, showing I had been alive, albeit in critical condition, during every single transaction Daniel made. He highlighted the dates, each one stamped with proof that I was in a hospital bed, fighting for my life, while Daniel was emptying accounts and signing property papers. The forged death certificate was brought in as Exhibit A. When the judge examined it, Jack pointed out the false signature from a doctor who didn't exist. "This wasn't a mistake," Jack said clearly. "It was a deliberate act to commit fraud." Witnesses began to take the stand. The notary who signed the house sale recalled Daniel acting strangely cheerful for a grieving widower. A neighbor testified to seeing him load furniture into a moving truck less than 2 weeks after the accident. Then came the most damaging witness, a mutual acquaintance who had spotted Daniel and Megan having dinner together, holding hands, just days after he claimed to have buried me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the pieces stacked against him. His lawyer tried to object, to frame Megan as just a friend offering comfort, but Jack had already pulled up Megan's own public posts. Photos of the two of them captioned with phrases like, "Our fresh start," and "New beginnings." When it was my turn to testify, I told the court exactly what had happened from my perspective. I spoke of waking up in rehab, learning the truth from Laura, and the pain of realizing my husband had not only abandoned me, but profited from my supposed death. My voice cracked once, but I didn't cry. I wanted Daniel to see my strength. By the end of the day, it was clear the courtroom believed me. The judge's expression was unreadable, but I saw the way she studied Daniel, like she was already weighing his punishment. As we left that day, Daniel avoided my eyes completely. He had walked into that courtroom thinking he could charm his way out of the truth. But charm doesn't stand up well against hard evidence, and we had plenty of it. By the second week of the trial, Daniel's lawyer was running out of angles, but he tried one last desperate move. He stood before the judge, voice smooth and calculated, and claimed that the money Daniel had taken was marital property, and therefore legally his to use after my death. I could almost see the smugness in Daniel's eyes when those words were spoken, like he believed this would be the loophole to save him. But Jack was ready. He rose from his seat, the faintest smile on his lips, and walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he began, "what the defense is conveniently ignoring is that the majority of these funds came from Emily Lawson's sole proprietorship business. Under Oregon law, earnings from a sole proprietorship remain the exclusive property of the owner unless otherwise stated in a legal agreement, which does not exist in this marriage." He then held up my tax returns, contracts with clients, and bank deposit records, all clearly under my business name, showing years of earnings that were mine alone. The defense lawyer tried to object, but the judge allowed it. The color in Daniel's face shifted from confidence to something much closer to panic. And then came the death certificate, the one Daniel had submitted to multiple institutions to gain access to certain accounts. Jack placed it on the evidence projector for the entire courtroom to see. Every forged detail lit up for the record. "This document," Jack said firmly, "was not issued by the hospital. It was created and filed by the defendant. It is a deliberate act of forgery and fraud." The judge studied it for a long moment, her jaw tightening. That was the moment I knew Daniel's fate was slipping away from him. But the final blow came when Megan was called to the stand. She walked in looking nervous, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Under oath, she initially tried to stick to short, safe answers. But Jack's questions were sharp, and it didn't take long for her to crack. "Miss Carter," Jack said, leaning slightly on the podium, "did Daniel ever tell you his wife was still alive after the accident?" She swallowed hard, eyes darting toward Daniel before looking down at her. "No," she admitted quietly. "He told me she was out of the picture for good." Jack's voice didn't waver. "Did he say those exact words?" "Yes," she whispered. "He said she was gone, and everything they had was his now." A ripple went through the courtroom. Daniel's lawyer tried to object again, but it was useless. Megan's words had sealed it. This wasn't confusion or grief. It was premeditated. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just sat there, watching Daniel sink deeper into the hole he had dug for himself. Every lie he'd told, every move he'd made, was finally unraveling, right there in front of everyone. The final day of the trial felt heavier than all the others combined. The air in the courtroom was tense, like everyone was holding their breath. I sat with my hands clasped in my lap, staring at the polished wood of the plaintiff's table while the judge reviewed her notes. Daniel sat across from me, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. He didn't look smug anymore, just pale and tired, like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, it is the court's determination that the defendant, Daniel Lawson, knowingly and intentionally committed fraud, forgery, and theft against the plaintiff, Emily Lawson." A quiet murmur passed through the courtroom. My heart thudded in my chest. The judge continued, The court orders the defendant to return all misappropriated funds, totaling $217,000, to the plaintiff, along with additional damages of $100,000 for emotional distress and financial hardship. Furthermore, the forged death certificate and related fraudulent activities will be referred to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Daniel's head dropped. His lawyer's face tightened, but there was nothing left to argue. The decision was final. Then the judge addressed the property sale. It is further ordered that the plaintiff is entitled to her rightful share of the proceeds from the marital property sale, amounting to $93,000, to be paid within 30 days. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to cry in front of Daniel. Not after everything. I wanted him to see me calm, steady, and unshaken. The bailiff handed me a copy of the judgment, the official seal pressed into the paper. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I had my name back, my life back, and soon the money he stole from me. As the judge adjourned the court, Daniel stood slowly. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no apology there, only the cold realization that he'd lost. He turned and walked out without a word, his lawyer trailing behind him. Jack put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Emily," he said softly. "He's not walking away from this." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. This wasn't just about the money, and Jack knew it. It was about proving I hadn't been erased, that my life still mattered, even if Daniel had tried to write me out of it. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool and crisp. Laura was waiting on the steps, and when she saw me, she pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "It's over," she whispered. Yes, it was over for Daniel. But for me, it was the beginning of something new, something I was going to build on my own, without him and without fear. The weeks after the verdict felt strangely quiet. For so long, my life had been consumed by hospital rooms, legal meetings, and the gnawing weight of betrayal. Now, with the judgment in my favor and Daniel facing criminal charges, I could finally think about something other than survival. I started looking for a place to call my own, not something grand or flashy, but a space that felt safe. After a few weeks of searching, I found it, a small 2-bedroom house with pale blue shutters and a garden that caught the afternoon sun. It wasn't the kind of home Daniel would have chosen, but it was exactly what I needed. The first time I walked through the front door, I knew it was mine. Laura helped me move in. We laughed over unpacking dishes, rearranged furniture 3 times before settling on a layout, and celebrated with takeout pizza on the living room floor. For the first time since the accident, I felt grounded, like my life was slowly knitting itself back together. Once I was settled, I turned my attention to my graphic design business. My old clients had been understanding about my absence, and with word spreading that I was taking on projects again, work started to flow in. I updated my portfolio, set up a cozy home office with sunlight streaming in through the window, and realized I was working better than I ever had before. There was a different kind of fire in me now, a stubborn determination to stand on my own, no matter what. Every so often, someone would mention Daniel. I knew from the news that his legal troubles were piling up, that the criminal charges for forgery and fraud weren't going away. But I didn't dwell on it. The court had already done what needed to be done. He no longer had power over my life. Still, at night when the house was quiet, I'd sometimes find myself wondering how he could have done it. How a man who once held my hand through the smallest struggles could vanish the second things got hard, and take everything with him. I don't think I'll ever understand that kind of coldness, but I've come to accept that I don't need to understand. What mattered was that I didn't let him win. Taking him to court, watching the truth come out piece by piece, wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about looking him in the eye and proving that I wasn't the helpless, broken woman he'd counted on me to be. Now, when I step into my little blue-shuttered house, I don't see the wreckage of what he left behind. I see proof that I rebuilt on my own terms. And that's something no one, not even Daniel, can ever take from me again. What about you? Do you think I was right to fight back and take Daniel to court, or should I have just walked away and started fresh without looking back? Share your thoughts below. I'd really like to hear them. And if you like hearing real stories like mine, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when a new one is out.